Well, we've come to the end of the event. We're just going to do some summing up now, pulling together some loose ends and just getting some sense of the key takeaways from 3 really, really busy days of discussions. We have talked about the opportunities and the challenges facing consumers, consumer authorities, businesses, and other stakeholders in this whole very complex world. And so we're delighted to be joined now by Hugh Stevenson, Chair of the OECD Committee on Consumer Policy, who we saw right at the beginning. It seems a long time ago now, Hugh, and Andy Wyckoff, who is the OECD's Director of Science, Technology and Innovation, so basically leading the OECD's work on consumer policy. We're also going to look, as we go through, at some of Josh's illustrations from the last 3 days. I'm losing my voice after all this talking, excuse me. We said to Josh that he could lie down and have a cup of tea now. He doesn't have to illustrate this session, but we are going to look at his wonderful work. So Hugh, key takeaways. I mean, it's been fascinating, hasn't it? What do you really pull out of what you've been watching and hearing over the last 3 days?
Well, for me, the discussions have just been terrific. One thing the sessions have highlighted or confirmed for me is that to design effective consumer policies, we need to improve our understanding of how consumers actually behave in the marketplace. What affects their trust? How do they make choices? What problems do they actually experience? And that kind of empirical grounding, I think, is key to seeing what policies we need and what policies are likely to be most effective in practice. Indeed, the question of how consumers behave in their real-world transactions has played an increasingly central role, I think, in the committee's work. And I saw this reflected today a number of times in our session on online disclosures and dark patterns, but also when we discussed, for example, how consumers view green claims and sustainable consumption, how consumers view the use of their personal information, how consumers deal with product safety. So one key point, I think, is that good consumer policy now more than ever requires good data. We also heard in a couple of the sessions about how some people refer to as datification, or the collection of vast amounts of consumer data, consumer profiling, and personalization may exploit what I noticed one of our panelists today called behavioral market failures, and could also be information market failures, and leave us, all of us, vulnerable online in certain situations. And this is an area that as Andrew Hadley pointed out, the committee's policy toolkit addresses, and where we need more research, I think. So point 2, I think, good consumer policy requires a good understanding of data use. Finally, there is the need, the opportunity, really, for consumer policy to play its part in promoting sustainable consumption patterns. A number of the speakers have noted that obviously consumer spending is a driver of economic growth, certainly in OECD countries. So enabling consumers to make truly greener choices can have a significant cumulative effect on the environment and governments and businesses that effectively can nudge consumers in the right direction, hopefully can help in overcoming what some refer to the sustainable consumption paradox. For that, though, it is critical that the education and the green claims be substantiated. I think someone used the phrase yesterday, no data, no claim. It's also critical that consumers can really understand the claims that are being made. So think of our conversation earlier today about effective disclosures. So the third key point, I think good consumer policy work can have, done right, significant cross-cutting impact.
Yeah, I think that came across in a number of the conversations. So, but yes, you're so right. Getting inside the head of the consumer was your first point, and so important. So, Andy, what have you taken out of these all these debates? And so, I mean, each of the debates was so rich, so much coming out. What have you taken away?
Well, let me back up just a second, Cathy, and really, I just want to take a moment to thank Hugh, his chairing of the Committee on Consumer Policy, and the Secretary, and you, Cathy, and Josh as well, for what I think has been an amazing 3 days. It's been excellent, and I think it's testament to the committee's hard work and the direction you're going in. that you've been able to make this conference happen, and all this despite the challenges of confinement and the COVID pandemic. So my hat goes off to you. I think what you're hearing in the digital transformation further accentuates this is just the centrality and the growing centrality of consumers as a key factor in the global economy, and making the transformation work in a way that we want to make sure we get all the societal benefits we can out of it. And within that, we know that trust in general, but in particular now data, plays a key role as these digital currencies making this happen. And one of the challenges for us, and you've heard it over a couple of the sessions, is keeping up with the pace of technology, which doesn't slow down in this area. I've been observing it for almost longer than I want to admit, but it just keeps going. And artificial intelligence is just the latest wave of these fast-moving technologies. And why, with all technologies, I think it brings a lot of benefit to consumers. It also brings some downsides and some unknowns that I think we need to be very careful about. And so it's always a challenge to narrow the gap between where the technology is and where policy is going. And that's no different in the area of consumer policy. So as Hugh was just saying, I think what I was taking away is just the need for new skills, more evidence and data. And we can say that almost at any OECD conference, but I think it's particularly important here in the context of consumer policy. You need to change consumer behavior, as Hugh was just saying. You need to enable those consumers to make really well-informed decisions. This is essential for making markets happen. It's about protecting them from unsafe products in maybe ways that we can't even imagine now, particularly the way that software works or sometimes doesn't, as we all know. And then bring them into the green transition. If we don't have consumers behind this, I think it's going to be a very long and difficult transition. And throughout the 3 days, we've heard just the need for enhanced international cooperation. No one country can go it alone. No one international organization can go it alone. We need to join together. And this is not only for, I think, effective enforcement that can help create this better digital marketplace, but also just efficiencies for consumer protection authorities. And you've heard of this afternoon. You need to work together because these are not the best funded parts of government. And by being clever and working together, I think we can really help that. And then the last thing is, and you've done it here, and I want to applaud you, is just building the links across the stakeholder community. We say it lots of times, it's not so easy to do. And I think you're doing it very well here between policymakers, those who are responsible for enforcement, the global business community, civil society. All these groups coming together, I think, are key for coming to grips with the new technologies, business models, consumer behavior, and what we expect out of policy. And it's with that, I just want to say thank you. I think this has been a great step in helping us plot where we need to go going forward.
Well, going forward indeed, because I mean, what we've been doing in the last 2 days as well, of course, is marking 50 years of OECD consumer policy, which has been quite astounding. If you think about all the different elements that have been achieved, setting standards for better consumer policies globally, that's one thing. The recommendation on consumer protection in e-commerce, the recommendation on consumer product safety, research to improve the evidence base for consumer policy making, particularly in the area of behavioral insights, and then the practical tools that we've been hearing about, and really importantly, the global recalls portal, which everybody's been talking about in the last couple of days, and a number of other sort of best practice guides. So an awful lot. So Hugh, what's next on the agenda? Because where do you go from here?
Well, we have a lot in store with the Consumer Policy Committee. I'd like to think we have enough for a running start on our second 50 years. Although, as Andy points out, we need to be running just to keep up here with all that's going on. Over the next year, we're going to be doing work in just about all the areas that have been covered during the conference. So we've started to look at what consumer vulnerabilities may be linked to the going digital transformation. We heard quite a bit of discussion about that earlier. The committee will soon also be releasing a report on a survey that was sent to both online marketplaces and government authorities on the role of those marketplaces in enhancing consumer protection. So watch our webpage for that. We're also planning to do more work on dark patterns we heard about today, and on enhancing online disclosure effectiveness. And we're going to explore new ways of measuring consumer harm, new ways of measuring consumer trust, and the effectiveness of consumer policies in action. And that's in addition to the continuing work on product safety. And obviously, sustainable consumption and green claims will also become an increasingly important part of all our work streams. And I think we also should follow up on the suggestions made from our colleagues on the last panel to look for more opportunities to deal with the geographic and language barriers here, and translating and using outreach with more of our work.
So you won't exactly be putting your feet up. There's a lot going on. And it's one thing that came through from different organizations was just the cross-cutting nature of consumer policy. I mean, because obviously within the OECD, you're dealing with more than just consumer policy. It's education, it's environmental protection, whatever. So how, Andy, do you get that kind of holistic approach, if you like, to deal with the sort of broader mission of the OECD? To bring all the policies together?
Yeah, so thank you, Cathy. I think the OECD has the advantage of having almost every policy field under its within its remit, within its mandate, under one relatively small roof in Paris. And so this makes joining up some of these issues easier. Just in my own directorate, we connect consumer policy to a lot of the issues you've been talking about today: artificial intelligence, data protection, privacy, digital security, protecting children online, digital connectivity, and online misinformation. That's just my directorate. But I think what's important is when we reach beyond my directorate to others that deal with issues of competition, regulatory policy, or environmental protection. And I actually think this is one of OECD's comparative advantages, to bring in this interdisciplinary approach, which allows us to take a whole government framework for policy, particularly to tricky areas like the digital transformation or certainly climate change. And so with this, I think the committee benefits and both informs those other groups. And it's beginning to do that in areas such as we have a survey out to businesses on the use and diffusion of AI, which CCP has contributed to, as well as work going on in a sister working party, actually a working party on digital security and on security in the digital economy, sorry, that's looking at the safety of Internet of Things. Let me end there and just say that I think this work is not easy, but we've gotten better at it over time.
Absolutely. Well, the title of the Congress, of course, is the Consumer Marketplace of the Future. So if we're looking at a policy around the consumer marketplace of the future, if you just had to, well, both of you think of 3 words that should somehow be embedded at the very heart of that policy, what would those words be? So maybe Hugh, you'd like to start off.
So data, and data, or if you like 3 different words, data, empowerment, and sustainability.
Okay, but we got your message, the importance of data, as I would say it. It's like the potato and potato, data and data. Great. Well, that's very, very clear. Andy, what would you say?
Well, I think Hugh's covered data, so I'm not going to go there. But I think we have to be very inclusive. We have to look at all consumers, all of whom have very different needs. To me, not surprisingly, international cooperation is fundamental on this. We can learn so much from each other. And lastly is the convergence of these issues with many other issues. And so it's that convergence issue, I think that will remain important going forward.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed. Obviously, thank you to everybody who's been watching. Thank you to all the wonderful speakers. Thank you to all the wonderful moderators. Thank you to Josh for all his wonderful illustrations, which will be on the website to be looked at in more detail. I just want to tell everybody that there's a survey on the conference platform that we would really like you to fill in, because it's not just sort of whether you thought this was a good event. It's more important than that. It's actually getting your views on the key issues that you think that consumers will face in the marketplace of the future. So there's really sort of content here. And we want to know also the particular questions that you think the committee should be considering in its upcoming policy work. So really would be great. And you can also submit links to any work that you or your organization are doing that you would like to draw to the attention of the OECD committee. So it really is a sort of an important survey. So if you go to the Have Your Say tab on the platform, and this survey will be there for 2 weeks. So you've got a bit of time to fill it in. You don't have to do it today, but do it quickly because you'll forget otherwise. So, and it really is important. Also to tell you that there will be recordings of all the sessions available on the website, because you probably haven't had time to sit through every single one of them. So the recordings will be available. And as I say, the illustrations will be there as well. So Hugh, perhaps you would like to just give some final words to close us completely.
Yes, many thanks, Cathy, for driving us through these informative 3 days of sessions. And I'd like to join you also in thanking all the participants and look forward to receiving that further input. It's really terrific for the committee to be able to get that kind of information going forward from an audience that has participated so actively. We've had hundreds of people from, I think, as you mentioned, 102 countries from every part of the world attending and participating. So let's take advantage of that. Let's continue these conversations and get that input. I think it's very valuable. Let me also thank the outstanding, the exceptional OECD Secretariat team that you haven't seen, but is behind the organization of this event. Brigitte Akoka leads that team, which also includes Time Bourdon, Nicholas McSpadden-Brown, Reiko Odoko, Daisy Pelham, Jan Cheke, and Alice Weber. And I really wish I had time to tell you about the contributions that each of those folks have made to this event. I'd also like to thank the other Secretariat folks who have pitched in here: Sarah Ferguson, Sylvain Fracola, Stella Horson, Matthew Nutting, and not to be forgotten, the interpreters. Thanks also to all the members, the observer countries, and the other participants in the Committee on Consumer Policy, and also its working party on consumer product safety for their tremendous input. And you heard from several of them during the conference as moderators, as panelists, and so forth. And we've also gotten contributions from a number of those folks behind the scenes. And without them, this conference really wouldn't have been possible. And that kind of active engagement has been the hallmark of the committee in the many years that I've been involved with it. And finally, thanks to the audience for your active contributions, much appreciated as we move towards the consumer marketplace of the future. Take care.